Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and to part 4 of the series I call How to Arcane. In parts 1 to 3, we covered pure Arcane builds, from creating and planning your build, to the science and mechanics of Arcane, and ending with dominating your opponent. Finally we get to part 4, hybrids. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the hybrid weapons for Arcane builds, as well as some of the builds themselves. Let's start with our skill-based weapons, and first on the list is the Burial Blade. The Burial Blade is a skill-based weapon with B scaling in both skill and arcane. Let's compare some of the ARs with a skill build and an arcane build, and let's see some of the gains you receive through leveling up both skill and arcane stats. We can see that the best gains will come from using this weapon with nourishing gems and a higher skill than arcane. Even with a high arcane stat and S scaling in arcane, we can see that this weapon still performs better on a skill build than on an arcane build. Let's look at the Blades of Mercy next. Although easy to counter, the Blades of Mercy is the ultimate skill-based weapon with S scaling at plus 10. With 50 skill and 50 arcane, this weapon performs better with nourishing gems as opposed to plain physical gems. However, the addition of 9% physical plus flat arcane results in the highest AR rating for this weapon. Given that arcane damage is not present during visceral attacks, the main issue that you must decide on is how important visceral attacks are for you. Let's move on to our strength-based hybrid weapon, starting with the Holy Moonlight Sword. Probably the most iconic weapon FromSoft has ever created, this weapon is in itself an entire amount of trickery and armory. This weapon has two forms, the physical damage output and the arcane damage output. When in arcane form, this weapon has a number of uninterruptible transformation attacks, including a guard break during a follow-up if you have the stamina left for another attack. In physical form, the best returns from scaling come from strength until 25, then from dex until 25, and then again from strength up until 50. Yes, this is a quality-based weapon that benefits from nourishing gems the most. For better physical damage, add gems with a physical damage bonus. I'm yet to find a nourishing gem with arcane damage bonus, so I've settled for 6% charge attacks, which makes the two-handed charge extremely devastating. With S scaling in arcane on this weapon, even with 70 arcane, it does not add any benefits. Next up is the Tinnitus. This is a one-handed weapon that also has two forms, the mace and the charged mace. This weapon has B scaling with strength and some great returns on point investment, but a limited moveset which can be easily parried, particularly with a transformation attack during combat. But with a high arcane and nourishing gems with bolt-based damage, the charged AR jumps from 537 to 953, increasing arcane scaling to S scaling, and we almost hit 1000 AR in charged form with this weapon. Absolutely devastating. Next up is the Boomhammer, and this is another ridiculously powerful one-handed arcane weapon with a poor moveset. The two main moves include a wide swing and the forward thrusting transformation attack. When used together, this weapon does very well against groups of opponents or in PvP. But be warned, this weapon consumes stamina like crazy. Another drawback I found in PvE was the lack of a serrated edge for beasts. Let's take a look at some of the gem options. Initially I added physical gems, then went with physical and additional fire damage on each gem. At minimum strength, the additional fire damage just beat the pure physical gems until I ventured past 40 strength. Finally, I added nourishing gems and found that regardless of the amount of strength or arcane I had, the nourishing gems gave the best returns on point investment. On a lost version of this weapon with 3 nourishing gems each adding fire damage, I have no doubt that this weapon can reach 1000 AR on a 50-50 build. The amygdala arm. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I struggled to love this weapon, for the simple fact that the transformed R2s resulted in me being parried almost every time. The window is just so big. Until I figured out that this weapon works best when chaining transformation and normal attacks together. Then it really shines. The strength scaling is very good, and I still get great returns even when using 9% physical and flat 7-2 arcane gems instead of all physical or nourishing. In fact, the damage output is almost identical for all 3 at 50 strength. But S-scaling arcane is definitely not beneficial with a high arcane in this weapon. And finally we come to Ligarius's Wheel. This is the best strength scaling hybrid weapon that also has 2 forms. It is S scaling in physical damage and C scaling in arcane damage. This weapon benefits greatly with a high arcane and S scaling in arcane when in transformed mode, just as much as it does with 50 strength in normal mode. With minimal strength and high arcane, this weapon can outclass its physical counterpart regardless of the gems you add. But the more you invest in strength, the more the physical form performs. For low level builds, this weapon is truly a beast when flat arcane gems are added, but for best overall performances, I found that nourishing gems give the best returns. The only drawback of this weapon mirrors that of the Blades of Mercy, and that's all the dash R1 spamming tryhards who really haven't got a clue how to do anything else. So, what do we know with hybrid weapons then? Invest into skill or strength will net you better returns on your hybrid weapon for the simple fact that scaling occurs off of base damage. Flat elemental gems give great returns but won't add anything to your visceral damage. For weapons with 2 forms, nourishing gems will give you great returns on both, making them the best gems for overall performance. And you can farm amygdala in both the Loran and Eyes chalices and use the lost versions of these weapons to take advantage of both the waning and triangle abyssals. Plus, you can tailor the additional bonuses on these gems to suit your weapon through saving to USB. And that brings us to visceral damage. Choosing the right gems for your build and weapon is one of the most important things to do post-creation. There have been so many complaints about the lack of damage arcane builds can inflict during viscerals. But we can see from the clips here that even at 12 skill, and with the right gems, I can inflict enough damage to take my opponent's health down to a pixel left and finish them off with a well-timed spell. Not only will nourishing gems add to your hybrid weapons damage in both forms, but nourishing gems and gems with additional physical damage will also add to your visceral damage. Wearing the Odin Writhe rune will also give you up to 3 additional bullets for every visceral you perform. In the final clip, you'll see that I have only equipped nourishing gems to my Kirk hammer, with 1 gem carrying an additional 15 bolt damage to ensure the weapon does 100% bolt overall. The nourishing gems give me a decent riposte damage, enough to force my opponent to flee, while I'm finishing them off with a well-timed spell. Dependent on the style of play you employ, you need to decide which trade-offs are worth more to you and how much skill you feel you need. Which finally brings us onto our hybrid builds. Let's start with our skill Arcane build. This is a very versatile level 110 skill build, which focuses on medium range combat and devastating close quarters finishing moves, while using the most amount of weapons possible for the skill class. The 30 skill makes it possible for high visceral damage, while using the Burial Blade, the Blades of Mercy, the Rite of Palash, or Simon's Bowblade, with the 50 Arcane granting us access to all of the Arcane tools. The key to this build is to mix things up in combat, forcing your opponent to move into the spaces you choose while chipping away at their health. It is also able to one-shot an opponent without wasting too many points into skill. Another variation of this build could include 50 vitality, 25 skill, and 5 blood tinge, sacrificing the use of Simon's Bowblade and the Rite of Palash for more vitality. Alternatively, you could always add the 10 points into vitality and push your build to level 120. Our second hybrid build is our Strength Arcane build, and in the first clip we can immediately see the difference between this build and the previous one. But this is also a versatile build, focusing instead on close quarters toe-to-toe combat while using the hunter tools to either self-buff or to keep our opponent at bay whilst our stamina regenerates. Many of the strength weapons use a lot of stamina, so it's important to not only have a decent amount of points invested into endurance, but also the hunter rune for faster stamina regeneration. Many of the strength hybrid weapons have short range, so having a second choice weapon with a ranged attack or hunter tools will be an obvious advantage. Although you may find it difficult to one-shot someone other than through a charged attack, with the right gems and a good amount of points invested into strength, you'll find that many of the weapons available to you will deal a significant amount of damage, more than making up for the lack of visceral damage. Another variation of this build would see us sacrifice the Holy Moonlight sword and the 15 skill, instead having 45 vitality, 40 strength and 40 arcane, and using the boom hammer, the amygdala arm, the Tinnitus, and the hunter axe as a backup. Alternatively, we could always go to level 120 and add the 5 points into strength and 5 into arcane for better returns on those weapons and access to all the hunter tools. Right guys, well, that brings us to the end of our 4-part series. I hope you enjoyed watching these videos, and if you have got any questions, please leave questions in the comments section and I'll answer them as soon as possible. And thank you so much for watching, and if you got this far, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more quality content. And until next time, happy hunting!